Alrighty, guys, welcome to episode 3 of what is now officially the No Starving Artist podcast, the NSA podcast. Today we have a really, really awesome guest who has done so much within dance, but is not necessarily a dancer, which is really, really sweet. So it's going to be a really, really unique perspective. He also does a ton of other things, which I'll let him kind of expand on. So Riley, go ahead and introduce yourself and let the people know what it is that you do.
Hey, thanks, Jason. My name is Riley. I don't know. I'm just an artist. I call myself a technology artist. I just make basically art with computers, and I like computers, and I like making art, and that's about it. So I do a little videography, a lot of music production. Right now, we're in my studio right now, in Ogden, and yeah, that's about it. Nothing too bold, but I love what you're doing here, man. So thanks for having me on.
Amazing. Of course. Of course. Okay. So I want to start with what I kind of just talked about, which is like you, because I know you through dance. Like
Yeah,
I don't know you through like your video or music side of things.
yeah.
I guess sort of the video side of things, but I know you mainly through dance. So explain how you've been integrated in dance, how you got brought into dance. Have you always been interested or around dance, or kind of how did that develop?
No, so it wasn't even a thing that I was all that interested in. But my girlfriend, she's my ex-girlfriend now, but my girlfriend at the time, she's a dancer. She owns a studio, in Ogden, and she just was thinking about like be doing some like influencer stuff and then opening the studio. Um, And so she had like some celebrity come in from out of state somewhere to do like a master class.
Mm,
And I was just there. I was like, I'll come film it. And then we started doing a bunch of like little concept videos for her Instagram and stuff like that. And it was really just to kind of like help her. And then I kind of filmed a dance video with Kylie Bronk. And it was like a full production with like 20 people in it with Sophia Wiley. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, this is cool. I think dance has this like dance is a lot like singing is. Most people won't just like start singing in the middle of like a grocery store, and most people won't start dancing in the middle of a grocery store. It's like it's a pretty intimate thing to do. So it's I see it pretty similar aspects. So it's kind of like a very vulnerable art form, both singing and dance. I feel they're pretty
mm,
similar. So just as much as people are kind of scared to jump up on a microphone and start singing the national anthem, I couldn't really like jump in front of a circle and start top rocking in front of everybody. So, you know, but I don't know. But I just saw like the vulnerability in it, and it was just really fun. So that's how I kind of started doing a lot of video stuff in like the dance industry. But I haven't done a lot recently, but I really want to get back to it. I actually just made a few phone calls yesterday to make sure I got some projects coming up to film some more dance stuff.
yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's kind of like we Riley and I had a conversation in DMs recently about the mirroring that happens between like the music industry and dance. And I think part of it is just because they're so just inherently integrated. Like a lot of music artists end up using dancers, a lot of music videos, a lot of like award shows. Um, so just by the nature of like them coexisting so much in the same spaces, the dance industry is really similar to the music industry in terms of like the ins and outs and how you kind of develop through it and grow through it. And when you look at the perspective of like a dance agency is so similar to a record label, um,
Yes.
in the way that they not only are facilitating relationships with dancers and with music artists, but also the way that they kind of the compensation works, and a lot of that is very similar. Um, so let's stay for a second on the dance studio thing because I think that's really interesting. So, what has been your um, experience working in and around a competitive dance studio? Um, and you're more than welcome to like plug that studio if you feel so inclined to do so. But yeah, what has kind of your experience been? What are the things that have been working or haven't worked? You don't have to give away all of your fantastic secrets, but I do know a lot of studio owners and directors kind of watch the stuff that I put out. So it would be interesting to kind of hear what are some things, especially now that we're moving towards, I shouldn't even say that, now that we are in this like digital video, like everything is online age, um, what are some things that studios can start to do that would help in terms of getting students, retaining students, and also just kind of like the overall brand image of the studio?
I think more than anything, the actual hardest part of like doing studio stuff is um, bringing in new kids. Because you
Mhm.
really only have like 2 periods of time when you actually bring in kids. It's kind of like in the summer when they need something to do, and then when right before fall, like right during fall, right about the time school starts. Because at that point, all the kids have picked the teams that they're going to be on for the next 9 months, and
Right.
then they might try something new in the summer. But other than that, they're not really going to go try anywhere else. There's not very many people who just like in the middle of December just end up showing up to your dance studio saying like, "Hey, I didn't like the team that I was on. Can I join your team?" It's like, okay, comp's in like two, like we're 6 weeks away from comp
Yeah.
season. I don't know what you can, I don't know what you want from us here. So,
Yeah.
um, that's like I feel like one of the hardest, the biggest challenges with like owning a dance studio is just how small the window of like turnover is, or the small the window of like getting like most of
Yeah.
your students are. Um, but it's definitely interesting. That's like always a constant thing, but usually like the word of mouth and then like the friends and the cousins like do wonders. Just
Mm.
like when someone has a friend and they're just so excited to go to dance every day, and then they see, their other friend like, that maybe doesn't quite like it, or their mom doesn't quite like it, but they see that their daughter and their mom is having so much fun going to dance and doing these activities and posting on their social medias because of that, like how happy they are being at the dance studio, that usually ends up having like way more growth than really anything else. It's usually the people inside that are just so happy to like share it that has the growth than more than anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, yeah, that topic of like those open registration periods, so to speak, is I've never really thought about it that way, but it is absolutely true. Especially on that competitive side, like you're not going to get somebody in December or January that just
Yeah.
happens upon your studio and decides that they all of a sudden want to dance.
Hmm.
Um, so that makes sense for sure. Um, Okay, so pivoting a little bit because we also had this conversation in DMs, and I think it's just such an important conversation to have, and I think that it also resonates a lot with a lot of people in Utah specifically, but I'm sure other dance scenes as well. Is this topic of like, so in one of my last episodes and in some of my previous posts, I was talking about gatekeeping in dance, and Riley and I had a conversation around that. And one of the things that he brought up was, and I'll kind of let him explain it in his own words in a second, but it was basically this idea of like not feeling super welcome within certain spaces in dance. And so then that inherently makes you not want to be a part of those spaces. Um, and so talk a little bit about just kind of like that, I guess, kind of your experience with that. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but just whatever you want to kind of delve into in terms of like your experience trying to get into dance a little bit more.
Yeah, there was like, it's always been pretty interesting because I've just been around so many dancers and I have so many friends who dance that I've always wanted to like kind of pick it up, but there was always this kind of almost, I would more put it as like elitism, like than like a gatekeeping thing, but almost you had to have a certain amount of like, you had to cut your teeth a certain amount before you could
Mhm.
share or show or teach or do anything like that, which seemed really weird for an art form. Um, I don't really see anybody else who says like, "Hey, you learn the E minor chord on the guitar, like now you like, you can't teach anyone else how to play the guitar now, So, but I mean, maybe it's just because the nature of having like 20 people in a classroom to not waste time might be the reason.
Mm.
For a little bit of gatekeeping, it might be kind of necessary, but I feel like gatekeeping is kind of necessary in a lot of ways. It kind of helps us, have like some sort of standards with kind of what we like live in, how people interact with each other. If you have like you can't just let any like person, jump out and teach your class at your competitive studio or even just, at at the Millenniums or
Hmm.
whatever,
Yep.
so, um, but Yeah, I was actually really interested in like learning crump. I just thought it was like a really cool like dance style. I thought it was so interesting. It reminded me a lot of like all of like the music genres that I like cut my teeth doing, and I still do like to this day. They have a similar feel to them. Like I feel the same way when I watch crump as when I play or when I write or when I listen to the music genres that I
Mm,
like have gotten kind of I'm used to producing, and I produce a
right.
lot. So yeah, I wanted to do that, but I always felt like I heard like one little like a few like little things where there was like somebody who said that like someone couldn't teach something to like a certain group of people because they weren't, I don't know, whatever, the top guy, like the top one of the top crumpers or
Hmm.
teaching, or they didn't learn from an OG. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was just so many. I heard like a few things where it was just like someone couldn't teach because like couldn't teach me because they hadn't been in it enough. And I was like, I
Mm,
need to learn step one. Like, why can't you just teach me like the E minor chord to see if I even like this? You know, or
mm.
like, I don't know, just a bunch of stuff like that. It just seemed like super strange because we don't really do that. I don't really know any other art forms of people who do that. You know, you feel like it should be open, and it always should be
Yeah.
open. Otherwise, you're just gonna close the door on all the growth you'll ever have, and
Yeah,
that'll
for
be it.
sure. Yeah, and it's such an interesting topic too because and it's funny that this is like what you're saying is a lot. There's a conversation happening in my comments on one of my TikTok videos, and it's literally about Crump, and it's the same exact topic. And it's just I think it's interesting, and specifically with that style, and from my understanding of it, is there is a lot of like intentional gatekeeping in order to keep the integrity of the style. And I think a lot of it comes from, I think that tends to happen in a lot of street styles now. And I think that it stems from people seeing what happened with hip hop in the early 70s and well, not really in the early 70s. When it started to get um, out of hand was more like the 80s and 90s is when it started to get really commercialized, and once the money started becoming a thing, then it started getting bigger than what they could handle. And I think a lot of street style dancers now have kind of seen that the way that played out. And so they almost safeguard their styles because they don't want it to be um, taken from them in the same way that hip hop was. And the hard part is like, you're absolutely right in the sense that now that's totally fine when things are accessible. But the hard part is like you said, when you're confronted with that crossroad of like, okay, you need to find an OG or a big to teach you, and you're unable to do so, then it kind of leads you away from the style entirely, almost because it's like, well, I couldn't find those resources; they weren't readily available, and so now I'm no longer interested. And so then it kind of perpetuates this feeling of like a lack of growth.
Yeah.
And something that I've always kind of like struggled a little bit with within street styles and hip hop in general is like um, the styles were started as just people having fun and just people expressing themselves like so many different art forms did.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard now to take away that aspect. But then it's like always this like contrast within myself of like also understanding that I'm a guest in the culture, and it is a culture that was taken in a sense from the people who started it. So I think it's hard, and I think like ultimately um, there needs to be some sort of like correction or some sort of like I don't even know. I don't know what the answer is,
Yeah.
and I don't think it's like my place to have the answer also. But I think that like I 100% get what you're saying, and I think specifically with um, like I said in Utah, I've heard that same story so many times, and it's sometimes um, hurts me because like I got into dance because I wanted to get into dance and it was fun, and there
Yeah.
wasn't any sort of like um, I wasn't met with any of that, like fortunately. So then I fell in love with it and wanted to continue doing it. But when you are met with that, it can sometimes turn you away from it entirely.
Yeah, totally. I wonder, I've shot a few videos. I shot like a video for like about a week with tie-dyes
Hmm.
down in New Mexico. We haven't ever shown anybody or released any of it yet, but it's just this big piece that I shot a while ago, and I just had a bunch of conversations about him. He makes music too, and obviously he's one of the creators of Crump. But I wonder what like his thoughts are on it, and
Yeah.
I wonder what he would say if he like learned that I wanted to get into it, but I didn't because someone else had like held the style hostage in a way
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
from me. But I'm also kind of the guy that like the way I like to learn is I like to I love like YouTube. I just will get on YouTube and teach myself anything that I want to know too. So like if I
Hmm.
can't learn off of YouTube, it also kind of like kills it, or if I'm gonna be looked down upon for like learning something on YouTube. Because I mean that's how it used to be. Like all the engineers when I was first starting to be like an audio engineer, I was like looked down upon because I was a YouTube producer. Like I started like learned off of YouTube, and
Yeah.
then next thing you
Yeah.
know, I have a million plays, my first million plays, and all these kids are coming out of school and they haven't hit that yet, and it's
Hmm.
like, okay, maybe YouTube producers kind of got it going on a little bit, and then and then it was just, and then all of a sudden everyone's a YouTube producer, and like
Yeah.
everyone's breaking the rules, and that's like, that's kind of like what even I even see it as like the guys who are breaking the rules the most right now in like the music industry are like the hip hop guys.
Mm.
They're like the kids who are like there's like a bunch of like I'm trying to think. They're just pushing knobs and doing things in ways they shouldn't do,
Yeah.
almost because they're like lazy or they don't know. But it sounds sick, and it's just like it's become part of the sound of like modern hip hop.
Mm.
It's just these kids just like clipping things, like there's a distortion like when you just turn up a signal too loud, and people are doing that with like their kicks and their 808s and stuff, and that's
Yeah.
like the sound. And it was just because people didn't know, they didn't have the rules, they just like learned off of YouTube, and they sit in their basement, and that became like part of the sound. But that wasn't the sound before. It was still had to be like really clean in like the 90s and 2000s, even like 2010
Mhm.
it had to be clean. But then
Yeah.
like 2015, when you had like the Juice World and the XXX, like those kind of guys started coming out, you started getting these really grimy sounds that were just like, who fuck it, who cares? Like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
just gonna be cool. They're just guys are just gonna go in on it. But I don't know.
Well, and that even I feel like that even happens in like I noticed that a lot in videography, which is our like that's our biggest common ground between the two of us, I think,
Hmm.
in terms of like hobbies, professions, whatever.
Hmm.
Um, and I noticed that a lot with when I see videographers on TikTok, um, and I see like the content that kind of pops off, and there is like really great like technical content that gets posted there, like in terms of like um, ISO and white balance, and like things are really clocked in and it looks fantastic and the coloring is amazing. But then there's also these videos that will go super viral that are like super overexposed, or like the white balance is super wonky.
Yeah.
And it brings up this interesting conversation of like, at what point does the power the viewer hold outweigh what's right or correct or proper? Because that's essentially what it is if the viewer, if the audience doesn't care, then at what point do we ask ourselves like, should I really care
Yeah.
about any of that, and I think it's similar with music, is like most of the people, just like the people that are watching these videos on TikTok, most of the people that are listening to music don't understand anything about music.
Yeah.
It's just what they hear and what they feel, and that's it.
Yep.
um and I think that's similar with dancing as well, but it's just interesting to kind of hear your perspective from the music side of things on like, because I hear what you're talking about. I mean, even, and I may be out of touch on this topic a little bit, but even I feel like with like the drill type beats that
Yes.
are like Pop Smoke are using and things like that, or we're using, it's the same thing. It's very like not what you're used to hearing in those spaces, but it,
Yep.
like, to me it's like I love it.
Yep.
So it's, yeah, I don't know, it's really really interesting, but I think that it brings up that question of like, is there really a right or wrong, or is it purely what the audience is willing to consume or not consume?
I feel like there shouldn't ever be like a real gatekeeper in those kind of things. Like if you want to learn like a style, like an exact like you want to learn a style, then like you should learn all of the backgrounds behind it, how these were made and why these were made. You can look into all sorts of things about like how drill was made. Like I've listened to all those documentaries and stuff. I started making a bunch of drill stuff. I love drill music. It's so sick. Um, and you know, you can do that with all the different like hip hop styles as well with dance. um you know, but ultimately it was like someone who was bold enough to like, instead of like putting like hi-hats on like tick, 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 they were gonna go you know, they
Hmm.
were gonna do, once that they broke the rule a little bit and they used a weird like shaker thing, and that was just super grody and disgusting, and now they're all distorted and just screwed up, and like
Hmm.
that's the drill sound, is these like hi-hats that don't sound like hi-hats. They're shakers
Yeah.
and like trees getting like the leaves of trees like being hit, and like I don't know, it's just like it's just these wild noises. They're bold enough to like break the rules, and that's kind of what I feel like the gatekeepers like stop more than anything, is like
Mm.
they make it so everyone almost follows the rules, when
Yeah.
that's kind of in my opinion, that's like probably the best way for you to never grow as an artist and to never monetize anything, because you're a copy of something that already existed 10 years ago or whatever, or 5 years ago, and there's already them. So like why learn exactly the way that like the creators of Crump made it, and why not make it yours?
Mm.
Why not do things a little differently? Why not screw it up a little bit? Because like that's what ultimately makes you an artist, and like who you are as an artist. Even with like music, it's when you get the guys who cross over two genres that you've never heard of before,
Yeah.
or they do production in a way that you've never heard of before. I mean, it's still, you know, like this. There's still like the songwriting, which is just like the choreography of it, but like ultimately. Um, Ultimately there's the people who really kind of innovate, and the people who are able to monetize those things, or able to, you know, kind of set a trend, you know, can't be, you know, copies of something else. So
Yeah.
the
And that
gatekeepers
brings up
hold
an
that back a
interesting
lot.
like thought of, I think the what I hear a lot in dance is like you have to understand um the foundation and like the right way in order to break the rules.
Yeah.
But now, like hearing you talk about people like this newer generation of producers that are coming up, and they're breaking the rules, but because they don't know the rules and because they don't know how to correctly do
Yeah.
something, is really really interesting, because
Yeah.
I absolutely, like I understand, like that makes sense to me, because I think that like it's essentially both. Like if you do know the right way, then you can also venture into the wrong way at some point, because you know
Hmm.
what's right and you can do the opposite. But at the same time, I think that there's a real sense of originality that comes from doing something just because you think that that's the way that it should be done, even if it's not the quote unquote right way.
Totally. There's e- oh, I had something I was gonna tell you. I forgot what it was. It was so good though. But it was on that like aspect of there's definitely these like producers who are just like, you know, breaking these rules. It was I remember now. So it was there was a lesson that I got taught about like music theory. I was watching, just like as I was like learning things. I don't know where I learned it from or what I learned it from, but it was a long time ago. I took an AP music class in
Mhm.
high school, and I know quite a bit of like music theory, but I never use it like at all.
Mm.
I'm always just doing whatever I think sounds good, and sometimes I'll know like a tiny bit of theory. Like I know that this needs a this, you know, this theory term in the song, but I'm using it like maybe once, maybe twice every song. And it's like nice to know them, but they're more tools than they are, at least the way that I use them. I feel like they're more tools than they actually are the recipe, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting, but there's a lot of, there's for sure like those audio rules as well, where it's like you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do this, and like all of the guys who are doing that can't compete in this modern genre, because there's kids who just do ignorant stuff on their songs all the time, and they're turning knobs way past where they were supposed to go, or maxing knobs out and then putting a second instance of that knob on there just to make it go further.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always like that, the kind of classic internet mindset of, the internet's not going to be the thing. The internet's not going to go past the 90s. It's not going to break into the 2000s. And then it's like,
yeah.
or I mean, we just have seen it time and time again where people have stuck to one specific thing so wholeheartedly, and then they completely miss the next wave, or kind of
Yep.
they jump off the track or whatever it may be.
Exactly.
Um,
I have some interns that I've been interning in my studio here, and I've got two of them, and one of them kind of came from the YouTube era. The
mhm.
other one came from more of an analog, like older school era. So kind of
Oh,
the
okay.
time that I grew up a little, or I like learned. Um, and they learned. It's so funny when they're like talking to me when they like make things, because they're like, "Oh man, I should only do like 3 dB of this," and I was like, "Why?" Like, and then he's like, "Well, I don't know." And it's just like, "Well, you should have a reason you're doing all of this, because like ultimately it's about the song, Ultimately it's
Mhm.
about kind of like how it makes you feel or whatever." And then like I'll just grab something and I'll just crank the knob all the way to the right, and he's like, "You're an idiot," and it works, And it's like, "You're a psychopath," but it's like I did that today in one of the songs I was just working on right before we got on. I
Yeah.
did like I did probably like 3 or 4 times the number that like I was ever taught in any course or by any mentor or any whatever.
Yeah.
And I kept like almost doubting myself. I went back to like the classical or like the correct settings or whatever, and it sucked. And then I would go back to like the settings that I thought it needed to be at. It was like good 3, 4 times more, and that was it. That's the sound. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting. And I think like the core elements of all this, and what I feel like, um, I understand now, but at one point was so confusing to me, is that there's this like balance of keeping like the styles, and whether we're talking about dance or music, keeping those styles, there does have to be a sense of like integrity and structure within those styles, but
mhm.
you also have to balance that out by allowing people to venture outside of those barriers and explore new things, because that's how new styles are created. That's how subgenres are made in all aspects of art. And I think that that's sometimes where my issue lands, is when the gatekeeping extends past, um, the
Expression and
realm of that
exploratory.
style. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I feel like that's the line. It can't like cross past
Yeah.
that. I have a phrase here at the studio. If it sounds good, it is good.
Mm,
And so I kind of don't care what rule you broke or what thing of theory you used, or if you sang the note wrong or whatever. If it sounds good, it is good. So, I just wish that was, something um, that was kind of one of the reasons why I didn't end up learning to dance, was because they didn't kind of follow that, like if it like looks good it is good, or
mm,
if it like feels good it is good, as like a
yeah.
dancer, or I don't know what an equivalent would to that would be.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
felt like that there were so many times where people were trying to show me, to like how to like, do some move that look good or feel good, and there were other people who didn't want me to,
Mm,
and that kind of was a bummer. So
yeah. Yeah. 100%. Um, Okay, let's shift a little tiny bit, because I want to, especially now, like talking about your interns, and like I want to jump to your studio a little bit, and just kind of like how, because I mean, you've essentially done something that in the production world, um, is not super easy. Like there's a lot of people who are aspiring producers that want to have their own space, or want to be able to do things, for other artists, and they're kind of stuck in like that limbo of not really sure how to get there. And
yeah.
for the dancers that are listening, like that would really be the equivalent of like you're a dancer that wants to go professional, or you're a dancer that wants to open a studio, or you want to start teaching.
Yeah,
Like getting to that next phase of anything is always really difficult.
it's
So what
so
was
hard.
that like for you, and like what was kind of like, was there any like one thing that changed in your mind or like in the way that you were doing things that allowed you to get to that point?
So there's been kind of like two major steps in my career so far. My first one, I was 18 or 19, and I was just looking at home watching YouTube videos and just YouTube University, learning how to make like do videography and learning how to, run my music software and teaching
Mhm.
myself all the different tools and whatnot. And then, but basically after I had learned enough and I had a few people, basically say, "Hey, I'm gonna, pay you to record me," and cool, that's great. Then I realized I was making about as much as I'd make in like 2 days of my pizza job. It was only 75 bucks a song. That's like crazy rate, but it was better than like making pizzas at Papa Murphy's. So, I decided to move down to Salt Lake, and I moved into a warehouse, and it didn't have a shower in there. And I just showered at the gym, and I just lived in this warehouse, and no one knew that I lived there. So, and so I had all these artists come in, and I would just, I just make music all day with them. And
Yeah.
with that, I was able to kind of like transition to being full time with it. Because
Mm,
there's almost a difference when someone works on something for 2 hours or 3 hours a day, or maybe even four, versus when someone does it for 12.
mm,
And I noticed how sharp my teeth got in that time. And I think that's an important part for an artist to figure out, is how to make sure that they're doing their craft all day, every day. That's probably like a good step. Hopefully, it's the same step as also you being like you working on the things you want to work on.
mhm.
But at that point in time, I wasn't really working 100% with all of the artists that I wanted to work with or doing what I wanted to do. And so that's this step right now is I've actually taken a massive decrease in kind of how much money that I make to move into this studio and work with these other artists. I've got a few artists that I want to work more on, like breaking artists and like making sure building like my own brand and building like my own like team or kind of groups. And I think like I'm really happy that I did that, but man, it's really uncomfortable right now because I'm wicked broke. I miss the Salt Lake like scene and like the energy of it for
Mhm.
sure, but like being in Ogden's way cheaper, and I'm able to kind of like risk more um down here, but I'm really kind of investing it into myself.
Yeah.
And so I think if anything, like as if you're like a dancer, like listening, you should probably just figure out the best way for you to be able to be dancing as much as you possibly can, whether you're either learning or working on dancing, or whether you're working on networking or making new connections or making more friends or making some sort of like concept video or whatever you think you can possibly do to like grow your career, even if it's just doing TikTok dances or whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of doing dance like as much as you can and building a brand for yourself. I would even say building influence for yourself is probably the best thing that you could ever do, because there's if someone can kind of like post on Instagram and reach 1,000 people that could hire them like right then and there, you're going to be way better off than someone with 1,000 people that follow them on there at their local, dance studio or whatever.
Mhm.
So I would say that's probably where I think at least a lot of power is. But I'm really pushing like the influences, kind of the currency of the new era, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. There was so many things in there that I want to kind of like quickly touch on or go back to. And one of them is literally the first thing you said about you started doing music for other people, and your was $75, that was actually your rate? 75 for a song?
Yes, 75
That's
for a whole
crazy.
song. Yeah.
It's crazy. So, but this is the reason I want to go back to this, is because this has been my most frustrating aspect of when dancers reach out to me, or when now that because I direct the studio now,
Yeah.
and like I still teach, but I'm in this kind of like director role, and so now I'm hiring people, I'm like getting people to come in and sub and all of these things, and so I'm constantly interacting with dancers and hearing their rates and hearing them and hearing them give kind of like what they would like to be paid. And I feel like that's such a huge thing that people are missing, is not that you have to degrade yourself and make no money, but it's the fact of like there has to be a build period, or else there's zero longevity.
Yes.
And I think that's what's really really misunderstood, is that like when I, because now I'm at the point now where like I sometimes will push back on people a little bit and just be like, why is this your rate, or why are you charging this? And I feel like the problem is people don't know. They don't know why they're
Yeah.
charging what they're charging. They're just charging it because they want so badly to make dance a full-time thing, but they're not necessarily willing to do what is actually necessary to do that. And that's what is I think sometimes misunderstood, is like that whole energy of like lowering your cost of income, or lowering your cost of like living, um, and then also having a period where you're, I love that term of like cutting your teeth and like developing yourself as an artist, because that's like when dancers ask me how I was able to like teach at a lot of studios, or how I was able to build my brand, it had nothing to do with anything other than the fact that like I had a proof of concept. I was doing routines. I was not getting paid a lot in the beginning. Those routines started doing really well at competitions. And so I didn't have to sell anything after that point, because it was like you could see what you were going to get.
Yes.
And so I think that that's sometimes what is like the missing thing, is like it's much easier to have an extremely high rate if you don't have to sell yourself to get that rate.
Yep.
If people just know what it is that they're getting, because they've seen it, because you've done those proof of concepts over and over and over again, they'll pay whatever they need to pay in order to get that.
Yep. I totally agree.
And then the other thing that I want to like, I want to hear you kind of like expand on more, is like that idea of like, you mentioned moving into this studio, you kind of had to set yourself back a little bit in order to take that next step. And I think that that's another big component of like, there has to, like, every time you make a jump, you're you're like pulling yourself back a little bit and making yourself uncomfortable to then continue forward.
Yeah.
So what, like, is this the first time that you've really felt that, or was like moving to the warehouse the first time? Like, how many times have you felt that like
Yeah.
terrifying feeling of
So
like,
far it's been two. So far it's been moving into that warehouse and then moving here into the studio in Ogden.
yeah,
Um,
and they
but
both worked out so far.
hopefully I'm still only like 9 months into the studio here, so we'll find out. But I have this phrase that I've been saying to like a lot of my artists over the past like year or so, and I haven't found it to be wrong yet. So maybe someone will tell me, but I believe that you only need to do two things to be successful in the entertainment industry. You have to be good at your craft, and you have to put yourself out there. And most people struggle with the second part, not the first. There's a lot of people who are really, really, really freaking good, but they just stay in their basement and just, play guitar all day or just write songs all day, and they
Yeah.
never actually share it with the world. So they never get any feedback back. They never like share it with anybody. They don't have any place to grow, because it's just the only people that hear are the walls and the bed, that they like dance next to or that they sing next to or whatever. And I feel like that's like the biggest mistake that artists make now. It's like we have access to like everybody on the planet basically in our pocket. Like
Yeah.
someone's gonna like you. Someone's gonna pay you.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever ran into like, because this was like a huge hurdle that I had to get over very, very recently, in order to start like doing everything that I've been doing as of lately, like content wise, is like I always felt like there had to be so much preparation into like what I was doing. And so then when I didn't feel like I prepared enough or put enough time into a piece of content or anything, I just wouldn't put it out, or I wouldn't even like start it in the first place.
Yeah, there's like definitely something there. And that's kind of why I felt guilty about, or that's why I don't think I took the risk to like do what I needed to do back when I was in my old studio.
Mm,
Um, just because I didn't like, I was struggling to get between like the C-list celebrities and the B-list celebrities. Like the
mm,
jump from like the guys with like 1 million followers on Instagram and 7 million. Like
yeah.
that's I was really struggling with that like area, and I still am. So that's kind of almost the difference, at least for me, for as a music producer. the difference between like having a career and having like a job or like a hobby or something. It's like I really wanted to be with kind of like those really heavy hitters, and so that's kind of why I moved back here, is to kind
Yeah.
of like take more of a risk, work with kids who like I think can be B-list celebrities, build them, grow them, and like a lot of these guys don't have the money to pay me, so I have to like be here and work for free for those guys so
Yeah.
that they can, so I can break a B-list artist rather than just like stay in Salt Lake with whoever has the most amount of money. And
Mm,
if that makes sense. So,
yeah. Yeah. 100%. And I really, really hope that like people are able to not like obviously watch this, but hear what you're saying, because I think that again, it's the point where so many artists fall short, is not understanding that um again, like your power is in showing what you can do and that you can do it really well.
oh yeah,
And when other people see that, then again, you don't like, because I get the sense of like kind of what you're speaking at is like you don't want to have to reach out to people. You don't want to have to like, you want those people to come to you.
yeah,
You want to break those artists, and then now everybody's like, okay, who was behind this? And I think that like that's such a valuable piece of like just a little nugget of information for so many different artists out there, is like continue doing what you're doing and proving and putting out content and putting out things, and working with people, um, so that you can show like, hey, this is what I'm capable of doing, and this is what like this is my skill set,
yeah,
instead of just it being like, this is my skill set, this is why you should pay me. Like, show people why those two things correlate.
yeah. Make it so people have to have you in the room, more than just like want to have you there, or like,
Yeah.
oh, they'd be cool, they'd get the job done. Like like that's the biggest difference between like those C and like B-list celebrities that I'm seeing, is like a lot of the guys who are like smaller, like they'd get the job done.
Yeah.
Or like I'll work with a B-list celebrity, but I'm only making like TikToks or whatever
Mm,
for them. And it's
mm,
just like for that, I'm just getting the job done. But then they're with like a massive producer, and
yeah.
that guy's not just getting the job done. That
Yeah.
guy's
Yeah.
getting a few million streams every single time. So, um, yeah. So that's at least where I'm at. So,
So talk a little bit about like, and you can go as in depth as you want. I don't want you to like feel like you have to get uncomfortably detailed in any of
no
these
worries. I'm an
answers.
open
But
book.
um, so I'm sure there's going to be. I say that like millions of people watch this, but if an artist watches this and they're an aspiring producer and they're like, okay, well, it's easy for you to say when you're sitting in your own studio and you have your equipment and it's like, okay, great.
Yeah.
But what was like, obviously there was sacrifice, or there was things that you had to do to get to this point. I mean, were you saving a bunch of money? Were you like not eating for days? Like, what was kind of like, how did you get to this point? And like, what is like, is the goal, like you said, to build these few artists that you're working with and then grow from there? Is this the last point? What's the next jump?
Um, I'm trying to think of like a good one to be off of. I remember when I was first moved to kind of down to Salt Lake and I was living in that warehouse, it was very much a ramen all day just to like make sure that I could pay the studio rent and pay the gas and the electricity bill, because that warehouse was huge, and so it was like, if the weather changed by 20 degrees, that could increase it by 200-300 bucks.
Mm,
So there was definitely like trying to be as like frugal as I possibly could. One of the things I think is a lot of artists kind of almost don't take advantage of when they're young, is how low like how monthly expenses almost turn into a resource of time at some point. So if you have like a monthly expense of like, let's say you have to make let's say you're just graduated, high school or whatever, you have $600 a month or something like that for a car payment, for a little bit on your gas, and pay for a little bit of food when you go do something. Like if you have to do that, you have to go get a job that makes you $600 every month or you can't drive your car anymore, or you can't go out to
Mm,
food with your friends, or you can't do whatever, but maybe you probably need that car to go to the next place where you're going to get to your next dance opportunity or whatever you need. So but if you increase that, let's just say you go buy a house and you now have like, you're now needing 2 grand a month. Now you need a job that gives you 2 grand a month, and you're now no longer working at a job where you have to work like 2, 4, I don't know, 8 days out of the month. You now
mm,
need to work 25 days out of the month to make sure that you can pay for that, that building, or this, your house or whatever. And
yeah.
a lot of artists don't take advantage of how important that like area is. Because for me, it was super easy when I transitioned, and I see a lot of my friends trying to make the transition now, but they've got these massive bills. They've got health insurance, and they got to
Hmm.
pay for a dog and all this crazy stuff that like they didn't have to sign up for. They could have done when they were 19, but
Yeah.
but now, so I'd say if anything, just like keep your monthly expenses low so you can take a risk. So you can go
Mm,
do something that's like either no one's going to pay you for or just could absolutely flop and you're not going to
yeah.
make anything off of. But those are the
Yeah.
things that kind of like, transcend more than anything. I like listen to like Billie Eilish's like album. Like she made that with a $900 microphone sitting crisscross applesauce on her twin mattress.
Yeah.
Like that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. She won 9 Grammys or something like that. Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no at this point like the tools are in your hands
Yeah.
to do basically whatever you want.
I mean,
So
even when you look at like, one of my YouTube rabbit holes that I often go on is like, I love music, and I love like music production and just the whole ins and outs of everything. And I think that like, even when you look at that, like there's like, I've seen clips of artists who like record their hits like in their hotel room when they're on
yeah,
tour, and they're like, and of course, I mean, yes, the argument can be made like they're sending it to like extremely amazing like uh people to engineer and master it after the fact. But like, I think it's just understanding that like core principle of you don't have to be in this specific space with this specific equipment and these specific people anymore. You can do things anywhere and everywhere with
yeah,
and there's so many different options. um because at the end of the day, I mean, I think about this with my videos all the time, is like, I'm going to put in all of this effort into this video, and then it's going to get triple compressed down on TikTok or Instagram, and then it's going to be, so it's like, it's more so about, back to kind of that, to circle back to the beginning, is like, is the viewer willing to consume it or not,
yeah,
regardless of like what they don't, they do not care
yep.
where or when or how, it's like, just, are they willing to consume it or not?
Totally. I have a phrase here at the studio, where I mean not really a phrase, but it's more of just like a thing I talk about at the studio where we don't really work on like making songs sound pretty. I spend a ton of time on songwriting, and so we
Mm,
spend tons of time like rewriting things. And I feel like a song is not really good until it's just like until I can strip it down to just like an acoustic guitar or a piano and a vocal and like or lyrics and like a melody. So it's really just like a voice and a piano. If it sounds good, then it's gonna sound good forever. I
yeah.
remember it was a Drake song and Travis Scott. It was off the Astroworld record. It was the biggest song in the world for like ever, like 6 months or something.
Like
Um,
sicko mode.
Sicko Mode,
Okay,
yes.
yeah,
I heard an acoustic version of Sicko Mode. It was so hard for no reason, and it was like just because the melodies were good and the
yeah,
like chord progression was. It was just like they repeated the same chords throughout the whole song, which most songs do, but they just had really really cool melodies. They had like a beat switch up in the middle of it, but I
yeah,
don't really feel like that was the reason why it got. It might have been, I don't know, but the song was just good,
yeah,
and a bad song is like not really redeemable, and I see it happen a lot with like a lot of artists who are I guess like younger producers. Is there's almost a or younger producers and a younger artists where they assume that they can write a good song,
mm,
not that they like I don't know that they have to get good at it.
yeah,
But again, it's that my little formula of like you just have to be good at your craft and then put yourself out there. Your story about saying how an artist is in a hotel room finishing or working on a song or whatever. That's like him making sure he can put something out there and
yeah,
that he can finish it. And that's him
yeah,
like working like way too hard or them working way too hard on making sure it gets out there. And
Yeah.
then, maybe where I'm at with this like songwriting thing is like, just don't assume you can write a good song, practice writing songs. Same way
Mm.
you have to practice being a good choreographer. It's not like you just like all of a sudden be like, I'm a good dancer. And then your first dance you ever make up, it's just a masterpiece. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
So, these are all skills you have to work on, but you can work on them and put yourself out there, because chances are if you do the first one you ever put out there, you'll probably get more praise off of your crappy first one than you ever thought you ever would.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I feel like the running theme of like my creative life has been all of the things I thought were going to do really well didn't, and all the things that I thought were terrible did really well.
Yeah.
Um, so the last like big top pivot I want to make, and I don't think like I just think this is a cool ending one, especially because I think you mentioned that this is something that you're working on. Is like, how do you in your space, in your like this point in your life, how are you creating your brand, or how are you developing your brand when it comes to like production and things like that, and what are some of the things that you're focusing on when it comes to that?
um so more than anything, I just want to show that I get results.
Mm,
Is kind of like my big one. So I've been finishing a lot of like songs with these artists and music videos with a bunch of artists, and kind of like taking a bunch of time with the artists that I really think are gonna break. And so I've been spending a ton of time on working with some of those guys. And that's made it kind of uncomfortable because not all of them can pay me the rate for what I think the song would need, or how much work that I do on the song, or stuff like that. So, because I mean, most of the time when people come in to do a song, there's a different rate from if I write the song versus if I don't,
right.
because that might take an extra day or so. So, um, as far as like my brand and what I want to put out, I've been actually pretty bad at like posting kind of like my brand, and I haven't been taking those, my two things, putting yourself out there, very well. And so that's one of the reasons why I did move back to Ogden, is I wanted to say like, hey, I don't want to have to worry about money. I just want to like, have the lowest expense I possibly can,
Yeah.
move into this like studio, even if it's cheap, even if it's kind of grimy, and just go for it, and just put
Yeah.
myself out there as much as I possibly can. So I'm building like a plugin, like a VST for like vocal processing, for like other engineers and producers, so songwriters can, just throw on a chain. They don't have to take, 8 years of, I don't know, training their ear or learning how compressors and equalizers work. They just get cool, pretty knobs just to
Mm,
turn and make it sound cool. So I'm working a lot on like a bunch of stuff that I'm not really gonna get paid for, but
yeah.
ultimately it's just kind of like I want to get the B-list artists. I want to be in all of those rooms. I want to be in one of those rooms and be one of like the most valuable people that I can be, and doing kind of things that I know I'm good at. So I'm trying to build B-list artists and make B-list things more than
Yeah.
anything.
I love that. I love that so much. Okay. The running theme of this is the last thing I like everybody to give is just like their one, and you've already given so many things, so it can be a repeat. But what's your like one, if you had to give somebody one thing, or even maybe when you're talking with your interns, like what's the one thing that you tell them um, in terms of like, if this is what you want to do, this is what you need to do.
um, Content. Just make things and put it out there.
Hmm.
And if you suck, you're not going to suck for too long, because you're going to be making so much that eventually no one will ever know. I remember, I hope he never hears I say this, but I was looking back on like Bozzy from Vine, and
Mm.
Bozzy got like kind of grew big on Vine, but like he didn't blow up on
Yeah.
Vine. He was cringy. Like he did some cringy stuff on there. But you don't know that because you only know the "you so
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just know the song because he made so many songs and he posted on, he went from like, it went from Vine to Musically to TikTok. We've gone through
Yeah.
3 apps now where the
Yeah.
guy still kept that's a long time to be still going at it.
Yeah.
And his like determination to still make it, like you can be cringy and you can do a bunch of dumb stuff, but if you just keep doing it and keep posting, eventually you can be massive.
Yeah. And his content's great now.
Yes, exactly. And he has like,
It's
and it just
fantastic
because he just
content.
grinded it enough. It's like
Yeah.
it was more that he spent time on putting stuff out instead of like getting good at his craft. And like
Yeah.
you can take that hit to your, to like your ego. And I wish I would have done that like earlier to just make sure that I'm posting stuff and putting stuff out there as much as I possibly can, because no one will like remember you for all the cringy things you ever did. It's just
Yeah.
they'll remember you when you have like a Grammy nomination or something like that. It's like, okay,
Facts.
we're hitting different now,
Facts. Yeah.
It's like they have a Grammy. Remember when they were doing like a weird TikTok dance? Like, no, I don't remember that at all.
Yeah.
Or all of the new people that will know of you will know you from that cool song, and the 1,000 people that know you now aren't going to care because they're probably already your friend or they're already not your friend. And you don't need to
Yeah.
worry about it.
Yeah. I love that so much. Yeah. That's absolutely the truth. It all gets washed down the feed eventually.
Yeah. 72 hours. After
Yeah.
72 hours, something's going to happen. Russia invade Ukraine or something, and no one will
Yeah.
remember anything about the weird TikTok dance you did. So
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Seriously, this has been just such a cool opportunity. And like I said, it's cool to connect with somebody who is so integrated on like so many different spaces, and just kind of to get your feedback as well on like the whole dance industry from someone who's not a dancer and like that entrance into it. And I think it's really valuable for teachers and dancers and artists out there to just kind of see the mirroring that happens between so many different art forms. So again, thank you so much.
I do have one question for you though, if you have
Yes.
time.
Yes.
I was curious how you, as someone you handle almost how you think of anytime you're jealous of somebody that's in the same field as you.
Yeah. I would say this is one of my like Achilles heels is so there's like imposter syndrome, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but
Yes.
I feel like I have the opposite of imposter syndrome where I feel, and I don't know if it's just like this inflated ego that I've kind of always carried, but I always feel like I should be in every conversation and in every project and in every like thing related to my industry. Like it's just this kind of like annoying facet of my personality that I have. And so that crops up for me often of like seeing lately it's been and I'm really not, I'm 27. I'm not that old at all, but I'm old enough to where there's another wave of dancers coming up that are doing similar things to what I was doing when I was at that age and that point in my career. And lately it's been that type of jealousy of feeling like I'm almost like old news or like I'm not involved in those things. So I'm not like current enough. And I think like the way that I don't know if I have like a good answer, because I feel like it's something that like I just have constantly struggled with of like feeling like I was not doing enough or I wasn't good enough. And I think that on the flip side, that's what's always progressed me or like propelled me forward is like that idea of like, I'm not there yet and not enough people are like recognizing me for what I'm doing. So I need to do more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I have like a really interesting story too, and it's like kind of almost it's a little personal with it too. But I remember I was like watching you post so many videos and work with so many dancers, and your videography stuff was so good, and you were working with so many dancers, and I was like definitely jealous of it. And I was like, damn, like why am I was like I was working with the Disney Channel stars, and then it was like, and then you just swept swept everybody, dude. And I was like, what the hell, man? But it was, you did good stuff and you're fun to be around and you put yourself out there, and I struggled to do all three of those, and so it made sense why you got it. But I remember I was really jealous of like what you were building and what you had, and that I had to like, I did like think about it, and I never had been really that jealous before in my life. And
Mm.
so I like sat down and I thought about it. It took like a day and a half to like really, really think about it. And it ended up being that there were like parts of things that you did that I wish that I was doing. And
Mm.
really, it was like the content pieces. It was like
Yeah.
you were putting yourself out there, you were making content, you were posting these videos, and it didn't even matter, and I didn't even know or really care what your rate was. But regardless of what your rate was, you were getting all of the gigs, and you were all like
Mm.
what the guys everyone was talking about, you know? And even if I was that guy before, you know, I had like a rate or whatever, and for whatever reason they were choosing you, it was probably mostly because you were posting your content, you know?
Mm.
I don't want to say that like either of us are like better than the other one,
Yeah.
but I would say that like you were out there, you put yourself out there, and then people saw that and they were like, I want to be out there too. Here's the content that I want to make. Will you make it
Yeah.
with me, Jason? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's interesting is like when you were doing all of the like specifically like the stuff with Sophia Wiley, I felt the
Mhm.
same way, like
Ah,
towards you.
gotcha.
You know what I mean? So it's like that's like I feel like that's like the dirty secret or like the big thing to like the aspect of jealousy is that if you're jealous of somebody else, chances are really high that that person is probably maybe not jealous of you, but they're jealous of somebody else too. You know, so
Yeah.
it's like this like weird curve and like weird circle that kind of follows around. But I think, yeah, I mean, I've always felt okay with posting content, but it is really, really difficult. And I feel like this period in my life is the first time when I've felt really consistent and really like um, determined to do it. And I think that
Dope.
like the biggest key was like just not caring so much anymore and not
Yeah.
like because at the end of the day like everybody's going to have something to say about anything that you do,
Yeah.
whether they like it or whether they don't like it. And so it's like, and I to kind of circle back to a point you made about like I'm at a point now in my life where I do have a lot of liabilities. My wife and I bought a house, we have a son, we have a car, we have all of these different things, so it's like my monthly expenses are significantly higher than they were when I was younger.
Hmm.
And so it's like now it almost becomes this switch of like, I don't really care about what anybody else has to say because if I don't care about me and my content and my like growth, then like my family's going to suffer for that.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's kind of just a weird dynamic that you like grow into through life. But that's really, really interesting because again, like I felt the same way. Like I was like, why am I not involved in those projects?
Yeah. It's funny too because the only reason I was involved in those projects is because Sophia danced with like grew up dancing in Phoenix, and the teacher who she like grew up dancing, the studio that she grew up dancing with at Phoenix comes out to my dance studio every year and does all
Mm,
of our hip hop routines, and
got it.
he's done that for like the past 15 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So she came out to do this Disney Channel show, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to do your first meet and greet? It's the first time you've ever done anything off this Disney Channel show." And
Yeah.
she says, "Yes." Comes down to the studio. I'd film a tiny little video for her, and then they just grab onto me and say, "You're coming with me everywhere
Yeah,
we
yeah.
go." And so then I end up at Millennium, and next thing you know, I'm filming all these dancers, and I have no idea what I'm doing. So
It's crazy how like one interaction or one set of interactions can open up the door to so many other things.
exactly. And it's like even and it was just more than anything, I was just at the right place at the right time, and
Yep.
then I, just happened to put myself out there. Like I didn't get paid for when I shot that video at the dance studio,
Mm,
but the rest of the things I did get. So it was kind of a it was kind of one of those things where I put almost my ego aside to like, you know, say like I'm probably not worth, what this video is going to end up being, but I'm going to go at it and do my absolute best. And then they happen to think that I was worth, my rate
yeah.
or whatever
Okay.
a rate would be, and they just pitched me some, and then we started up doing a bunch of dance videos, and it slowly
Yeah.
scaled up from there. So I guess that's like another way you can think about as an artist, if you're trying to get your brand out there, grow something. It's not really all about how much money you're making now. It's kind of just like what doors you can open up, and You know,
Yep.
because really, in order to have a career, you kind of have to be with the B-list, like A-list celebrities before you
Yeah.
can like have a career. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I have a job working with like the C-list people, um, you know, or even just doing like the job tasks of the B-list celebrities or whatever. So I
Mm.
haven't really comfortably crossed into any of the like working on any of the major songs with any like B-list celebrities and A-list celebrities yet. So um, I know once I get to that point, it's hard to take you out of it, you know?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
like in there, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. No,
That's
that
like the
makes sense.
ultimate gatekeeping part. That's the gatekeep
Right.
of
Right.
the, you
Right.
know? That's the good gatekeeping. I don't want, no one wants, you
Yeah.
know, it's hard to get in there, but it's for a reason, you know?
Once you're in, you're in. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, again, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. And it's really cool to just like connect with you and have like a longer extended conversation, because we've talked so many times in passing, but I don't feel like we've ever had like a really extensive conversation.
Yeah, nothing in
um,
detail.
yeah, so it's super cool just to like hear your story and hear all the things that you kind of like went through, because again, I think we all see like what's on social media and what's like consumable for us, but there's so many non-consumables that people don't see,
Yeah,
that go into like what they are seeing, if that makes sense.
totally.
But all right, man. Well, thank you so much again, and have a good rest of your day. And I'm sure that we'll have more conversations like this in the
Yeah,
future.
we'll cross paths at some point, man. Well, if
Yes,
you have any,
yes.
if you ever want to do a dance video or something, let me know. I've been itching to
Bet,
do one, so
bet.
I'd be stoked to do one. So thanks for bringing me on, though, man. I appreciate you.
Yes, of course. Alrighty,
Have
man.
a good
See ya.
one.
You too.